No one looked at him with respect. The human walked into the pit with quiet steps. No guards touched him. They didn't need to. He was not big. He had no weapons, no armor, no anger, just two eyes, watching everything. Calm. Too calm. Above the arena, Princess Ekeri stood in the royal balcony. Her face was made of stone, cold, sharp, beautiful. Her long black cloak flowed in the hot desert wind. She didn't blink. She studied the human. She hated humans. They are soft, she once said. They break easy, like dry leaves. Today she would prove it. Her soldiers had captured this one near the outer caves. A stray. He didn't fight, didn't beg, didn't even speak, just smiled. So she chose him for the feeding. Below the arena, giant metal doors groaned open. Chains rattled. The air turned thick. The smell of poison, meat, and ancient fear came out with it. The Rakhtar had arrived. It was not just a beast. It was nightmare wrapped in muscle. 2 heads, rows of black teeth, fire breath, eyes like red moons, claws like spears. It was her world's deadliest predator. No army had killed it. No cage had held it for long. But today it would eat a human. That was the plan. Ekeri spoke to her general without looking. Does it like human flesh? The general chuckled. We shall find out, my queen. The crowd roared. Thousands of aliens, warriors, merchants, children, all screaming, all hungry for death. The human didn't look at them. He looked at the beast. The Rakhtar saw him and charged. A mountain of death, rushing forward with both heads screaming. The human stood still. Ekeri raised one brow. At the last second, the human stepped left. Just one step. Not fast. Not slow. Perfect. The Rakhtar missed him by inches and crashed into the stone wall behind. The arena shook. The crowd fell silent. Ekeri's fingers curled. The Rakhtar turned, now angry. It swung its tail deadly and fast. The human ducked, then rolled, then stood behind the beast. He jumped, straight onto its back. One of the heads tried to bite him, but he moved again, light like air. And then, he bit the beast. The crowd gasped. Ekeri's eyes went wide. What is he doing? Blood poured from the monster's neck. The human didn't stop. He bit again, then tore something out with his hands. He didn't scream. He didn't roar. He smiled and ate. He chewed the Rakhtar's flesh like it was meat from a campfire. The beast howled and tried to throw him off, but the human held tight. With his hands, he ripped open the beast's soft neck skin. With his mouth, he pulled out black veins. The second head snapped at him. He stabbed it in the eye with one broken bone. Where did he get that? No one knew. He was faster than logic, more brutal than fear. And smiling, Ekeri took a step back. This was not normal. This was not human. The Rakhtar's legs began to shake. Its heads dropped. The human pulled its jaws open, and with both hands, snapped one of them apart. Crack! The jawbone broke like wood. The monster fell, dead. Silence. No cheers. No claps. Just fear. The human stood on top of the dead beast. Blood over his face. Over his chest. Still chewing. He looked up. He looked right at Ekeri. And smiled. Not a kind smile. Not a crazy smile. A knowing smile. As if to say, "You thought I was weak?" Ekeri could not breathe. He waved. Not with anger. Not with pride. With playfulness. Like he had done something small. Like eating her world's nightmare was nothing. Just a snack. The blood had dried on his skin, but the human still smelled like the beast he had killed. Princess Ekeri watched him from behind the tall glass wall. The cell was silent. No chains. No guards inside. Just him. Sitting on the floor. Eyes closed. Breathing slow. He was supposed to be dead. Not alive. Not calm. She had watched him kill the Rakhtar. Not with weapons. Not with magic. With teeth. With hands. With no fear. And then he smiled. Why? Ekeri stood with her arms crossed. He is not what he seems. General Trex beside her growled. He's a trick. A trained killer. Maybe one of the Terran death clans. Ekari shook her head. Death clans scream when they kill. They wear trophies. They want to be seen. This one is quiet. They watched as the human opened his eyes. He looked straight at the glass. Straight at her. Again. Ekari stepped back. Just half a step. But enough. The human stood up. Slowly. Deliberately. He stretched his arms. No pain. No stiffness. Like he had just woken from a nap. Not a battle. He placed his hand against the glass. And smiled. Trex moved forward. My queen, step away. No, Ekari said. I want to speak with him. Alone. She nodded. Lock the gates. Seal the room. But do not enter unless I scream. Trex hesitated. Then obeyed. Moments later, Ekari stepped into the cell. The human stood in the center now. Waiting. He did not attack. Did not move. Ekari stopped 6 feet from him. You're not afraid, she said. He tilted his head. Should I be? You should be confused. Broken. You should be in pain. I've known worse pain in a dentist's chair. Ekari frowned. You joke. He nodded. It's how humans survive. Humor. Hunger. Hate. In that order. She studied him. What are you? The man smiled again. I'm just human. No, she said. Humans don't survive the Rocktar. They run. They scream. You ate it. His voice became softer. Where I'm from, that beast would be called lunch. Silence. Ekari couldn't tell if he was lying. She sat down on the stone bench, keeping her eyes on him. Your name? He shrugged. Names change, but you can call me Mason. Mason, she repeated. What is your purpose here? I didn't come to fight, he said. I was just walking. Your guards chased me. I let them. Why? Because I wanted to see what scared you. Ekari narrowed her eyes. You think we're scared? He nodded. Everyone hides fear differently. You feed prisoners to monsters. That's not strength. That's a warning. To whom? To yourselves. His words stung. Calm. Cold. Honest. Ekari stood again. Where did you learn to fight like that? Mason's eyes drifted toward the ceiling. Back home, he said. We hunted beasts bigger than buildings. Some flew. Some spit fire. Some came from under the oceans. And you killed them all? Not always, he said. Sometimes they killed us. But we never ran. We learned. Adapted. Became worse than the monsters. Ekari walked slowly around him, like circling a wild animal. You said hunger, humor, and hate. What did you mean? Hunger keeps us alive, he said. Humor keeps us sane. Hate pushes us beyond what is natural. She stopped. Do you hate us? He didn't answer. Instead, he looked down at the dried blood on his arms. I don't hate you yet, he said. But I might. Ekari stepped closer. Why? Mason finally looked into her eyes. Because you looked at me like I was nothing. That's the most dangerous mistake anyone can make. For the first time in years, Ekari felt her heart beat faster. Not from anger, but something else. She turned away. You will be tested again. In the next arena. Mason chuckled. Send whatever you like. Big teeth. Long claws. I'm still hungry. You think you can survive anything? He nodded once. No, he said. I don't think. I know. Ekari left the cell without another word. But deep inside, her mind was not quiet. That night she couldn't sleep, because when she closed her eyes, she saw a man eating a monster, and smiling like it was just a snack. The gates opened again. This time there were 3 monsters. Princess Ekari stood at the high balcony. The air smelled like hot sand and blood. The crowd below shouted louder than before. They were excited, hungry, curious. Curious if the human would die today. His name was Mason, a quiet man with a calm face and a strange smile. He had no armor, no sword, just scars, and a history of doing the impossible. He had already killed their world's deadliest beast, the Rocktar, using only his teeth, his hands, and something far more dangerous, his confidence. Ekari had watched it with her own eyes. Mason didn't fight like a wild thing. He moved with purpose like he had done it before. And now, he stood again, at the center of a new arena. The pit was deeper this time, darker. The walls were lined with jagged bone. Shadows moved under the sand. The death pit. No one had ever survived it. Today, Mason was smiling. Again. Ekari frowned. Why is he smiling again? General Trex beside her growled. He's insane. Laughing because he knows death is near. But he didn't look insane. He looked amused. Then the sand moved, and the monsters rose. 3 giant creatures with snake-like bodies, armored heads, and rows of red glowing eyes. One of them hissed so loud that the front row of the crowd fell silent. Another one opened its jaw and sprayed acid on the stone, melting it like butter. Ekari leaned forward. Even he can't survive this. The bell rang. The fight began. And then, Mason laughed. Not a scream. Not a battle cry. A deep laugh from his chest. Like someone told him a joke. The crowd went still. One of the monsters struck first. Fast as lightning, but Mason ducked and rolled. The tail missed him by inches. The second beast came from the side. Mason leaped straight toward it, into the danger. He grabbed its jaw with both hands. And twisted. Crack. The jaw snapped to one side. The beast shrieked and crashed into the third one. Sand flew in the air. Mason landed, spinning in the dust, and kept laughing. Ekari's fingers gripped the balcony rail. What is he doing? This isn't fighting. It's dancing. Down in the pit, Mason's eyes were glowing with energy. His smile wider now. He whispered to himself, "This feels like home." He ran toward the second beast, slid under its belly, and stabbed its gut with a sharpened bone. One he had broken off the first monster. Black blood sprayed out. The beast collapsed, howling in pain. The third monster lunged with full speed. Mason didn't run. He stood still. At the last second, he threw sand into its eyes and jumped aside. Crashed into the arena wall hard. He climbed its back like a ladder, holding onto spikes. And then, with no hesitation, he bit into its neck. Again, like before. Ekari turned her face away for a moment. Not from disgust, from disbelief. Why does he keep biting them? General Trex's voice shook slightly. He's marking them, making sure they know who the predator is. Ekari looked at him. You mean, he's not just killing, he's sending a message. Mason stood tall again, covered in blood, chest heaving, smiling wider. He wasn't tired. He wasn't angry. He was alive. The third monster fell to the ground, dead. And the arena was silent. Again, Mason looked up, eyes on the balcony, on her. He raised his arms slowly, like a showman, and then he bowed. Ekari stepped back, heart beating louder than ever. He enjoys this. He lives for this, and we've brought him everything he loves. That night, she walked alone in the palace garden. Stars blinked above. Her guards followed from a distance, but no one disturbed her. She thought of his laugh. Not cruel, not mad, joyful. Like this wasn't war for him. Like this was fun. What kind of species finds joy in death pits? She closed her eyes, and she remembered his words from the cell. Where I'm from, that beast would be called lunch. Now she believed him. And maybe, just maybe, she was starting to fear what else humans could eat. The wind carried a strange sound that night. Not music, not screams, but a low, deep hum, like something ancient waking up. Princess Ekari stood alone in the royal library. Scrolls and books floated around her using magnetic lifts. She wasn't reading. She was searching. For answers. For him. Mason. The human who bit monsters. The human who laughed in the pit. The human who should have been dead. But never even looked tired. What is he? She pulled out a scroll written centuries ago. Old words from explorers who once visited Earth. Humans are unstable, unpredictable, dangerous. They fight like machines, love like poets, and die like legends. If you see one, do not provoke. Ekari read the line again. Then she whispered to herself, I think we've already provoked him. Somewhere below the palace, Mason sat in his cell, cross-legged, eyes closed. Not sleeping, listening. He could hear guards breathing outside the door, hear footsteps in the sand halls, hear the hum in the wind. He smiled. They're close. Next morning, a ship fell from the sky. Fast, silent. It crashed into the outer desert 50 miles from the capital. No warning, no signal, no smoke, just impact. Ekari stood at the war table staring at the map. Red lights blinked. It came through the planetary shield, her tech officer said. Nothing should be able to do that. Ekari's voice was calm. Was it ours? No, my queen, the officer said. It's human. Her fingers stiffened. Another one? Trex entered the room. My queen, do we attack? She stared at the blinking dot on the map and whispered, No. Mason stood at the cell gate when she entered. Before she could speak, he said it first. They've arrived. Ekari narrowed her eyes. Who? He smiled. My kind. Within hours, scouts brought back strange news. The crash site had no fire, no wreckage, no dead bodies, but there were prints, not from feet, from claws, 3 toes, deep impressions in the stone itself, and around them human footprints walking side by side, as if monsters and men had arrived together. Ekari stared at the photos. Mason's voice echoed in her head. I'm not the only one. She visited his cell again. This time, she asked, How many? He leaned closer to the glass. Enough. For what? To remind the galaxy why it fears us. She shook her head. You're just one man. Mason interrupted. I was the test. Her breath caught. Test for what? He leaned back and said nothing. Just smiled. That night, the stars above began to blink. Not with light, with shadows. Something was up there. Several ships, invisible to their sensors, watching. Waiting. Ekari stood on the tower, her heart heavy. Why didn't we leave him alone? She whispered. In the outer villages, the first signs came. Beasts running from forests, hiding, growling. Farmers vanished. Children claimed they saw men with black skin and glowing eyes walking without sound. One child drew a picture. A tall human, with sharp teeth and wings. Ekari summoned Mason one last time. This time, no cell, no guards, just her. In the palace garden. He sat on a stone bench, sipping from a metal cup. She sat across from him. You knew this would happen. Yes. You let us feed you to monsters. He nodded. I needed to see how scared your people really were. And you're terrified, he said. But not of me, of yourselves. She frowned. What do you mean? You've lived too long in safety, he said. But now, the wild has returned. Your people. No, Mason said, looking at the stars. Something older. Ekari whispered. Older than humans? He smiled. Much older. But we brought them back. Her voice broke. Why? He stood up. To remind the stars what fear tastes like. That night, all palace scanners went black. No data. No signal. Only silence. And above the tower, a voice echoed in the wind. Not loud. Not sharp. Just a whisper. He's not alone. The holy temple had not opened in 500 years. No visitors. No guards. No prayers. Only dust, silence, and warnings written in gold. Princess Ekari stood at its black gate now, her cloak dragging behind her in the cold wind. She looked up at the giant stone carving. A creature with 2 arms, no face, and a crown made of broken bones. She had seen it before, in her dreams, in her fear, and now, in Mason's smile. Inside, the temple walls were covered in ancient symbols. Not her people's language. Something older. Something human. She walked slowly, her boots echoing. A priestess followed behind her, holding an old glowing book. Her voice trembled as she read from the pages. Before the stars had names, they came. They walked on fire, slept inside beasts, and fed on storms. They were the first fear. And they were human. Ekari stopped walking. This can't be true. The priestess nodded. But it is. Our oldest gods were afraid of humans. Meanwhile, Mason sat alone in the high tower, watching, waiting. He could feel them getting closer. Not ships, not soldiers. Them. The ones he never spoke about. The ones who lived in shadow. The ones who came when blood touched sand. He whispered to the night sky, "You're late." Back in the temple, Ekari stood before a mirror made of liquid light. It showed no reflection, only truth. When she stepped in front of it, fire symbols appeared. "You fed the firstborn to your beast. Now the feast will begin." She turned sharply. "What is the firstborn?" The priestess was pale now. "A human who remembers." Remembers what? The old ways, the real war, the hunger that made planets fall. Ekari whispered, "Mason." That evening, black clouds moved in, without rain. Birds flew in circles. The moon stayed still, and the stars stopped blinking. The sky looked like a closed eye, watching, waiting. Inside the palace, Mason walked freely now. No guards dared stop him. He touched the walls like he knew them. He walked the halls like he built them. Ekari met him in the war room. "You were sent here for a reason," she said. He nodded. "To wake you up." "Wake us from what?" "Your illusion," Mason said. "That you are powerful. That your empire matters." She stared at him. "You're not just a soldier." "No," he said. "I'm a seed." "A seed of what?" He smiled. "Fear." Later that night, 3 priests gathered in secret. They lit old fire bowls and opened the forbidden book again. They read names out loud, names no one had spoken in centuries. And the walls began to bleed. Real blood, from stone. One priest screamed. Another went blind. The third dropped dead without a sound. Because they had said his name. The one carved deep in the temple. Mason. Ekari couldn't sleep. She walked out into the garden alone. The plants were dead. The sky above her was completely dark. No stars. No moons. Then she heard something behind her. Not footsteps. Breathing. She turned and saw nothing. But still she felt it. Cold. Old. Hungry. Then a voice whispered in her ear. "He's not the danger. He's the door." She ran. The next morning, a new star appeared. Bright. Red. Not in the sky, in the sea. An object had risen from the ocean bed. Round. Black. Covered in ancient symbols. Mason stood at the shore already. Waiting. Ekari arrived breathless. "What is that?" He looked at her without smiling. "That is the dinner bell." All over the empire, strange things began to happen. Machines stopped working. Animals walked backward. Children spoke in languages they had never heard. And statues of old gods began to cry. The galaxy had remembered something it tried to forget. Humans. Not as victims. Not as prey. But as something worse. In the council chamber, Ekari stood before her generals. "We made a mistake," she said. "We touched something older than war. Older than fear." Trex asked, "Then what do we do?" She looked toward the sea where Mason waited. And whispered, "We ask the monster what's coming next." Everything felt wrong. The air, the sky, the silence. Princess Ekari stood at the edge of the sea, her royal cloak soaked by salt water. But she didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the black object rising from the deep. It was not a ship. It was not metal. It was alive. And Mason stood in front of it, barefoot, arms open, like he was welcoming an old friend. She walked toward him slowly. "You called it," she said. "I didn't have to," Mason replied. "It was already coming." Ekari stopped. "Why?" He finally turned to her. His voice was softer than ever. "Because you gave me to your beast." Her throat tightened. "We didn't know." "You didn't care," he said. She flinched. Mason looked at the sky, now pulsing red. But that moment, something changed. Ekari stepped closer. "You should have killed us already." "I could have," he said. "But one thing stopped me." "What?" Mason looked at her. right into her soul. You! That single word froze her. She didn't speak. She didn't blink. She just stared at him. Mason stepped closer. When I saw you watching from the balcony, you weren't like them, he said. You didn't cheer. You didn't laugh. I was curious, she whispered. He nodded. And now you're afraid. She looked down. Are you here to destroy us? Mason sighed. I was. Then why didn't you? He took one slow step forward and gently touched her chest, over her heart. You made me feel something, even after all the war, all the pain. You reminded me I was human. Her eyes burned. No one had ever touched her like that. Not physically, emotionally. Through words, through silence, through truth. For a moment, she didn't feel like a queen. She felt alive. Mason, she whispered. Can we stop it? Whatever is coming. His hand dropped. No, he said. It has already begun. That night the sky tore open. Not with fire, with memory, flashes of earth, of burning cities, of humans falling and rising again. The galaxy watched visions of old battles no one remembered, except humans. Beasts that destroyed planets were shown running from humans. Worlds that prayed to gods were once ruled by humans in darkness. And at the center of it all was him, Mason. But he was younger, and his eyes weren't kind. Back in the palace, alarms blared. Something had landed in the city. A wave of black fog spread across the sky. It was alive. It screamed without sound. It melted towers, fed on light. The citizens panicked. Ekari stood frozen. Mason! She shouted from the balcony. He appeared beside her, like a shadow. Run, he said. No, she replied. Not without you. He looked at her, truly looked at her. You would die for me? I already killed you once, she said. Let me try something else. He touched her face. Warm, real. For 1 second there was peace. And then the ground exploded. The fog had reached the palace. Screams, fire, melting stone. Ekari and Mason ran through collapsing halls. She held his hand. Not for safety, but because it felt like home in that moment of death. Mason stopped in front of a giant gold door. What's in there? She asked. The heart of your world, he said. And now I have to burn it. What? If I don't, the fog won't stop. But you'll die. Mason turned to her, eyes glowing faintly. I'm not afraid of death. I've met it too many times. Ekari grabbed his hand. I don't want to lose you. He smiled softly. You never had me. And then, he kissed her forehead, turned around, opened the gold door, and stepped inside. A blinding flash lit the sky. Not fire, not destruction, but a pulse, a shockwave of memory and light. The fog screamed and vanished. The stars returned. The sky healed, and the city stood still, alive, but changed. Later, when the dust settled, Ekari stood in front of the golden door. It was now sealed with stone. No way in, no way out. Mason was gone, but his voice remained, echoing in her mind. I touched your soul, so you could survive mine. The golden door never opened again. Weeks passed, then months, but Princess Ekari returned to it every day. She didn't cry, she didn't pray, she just stood there, quiet, waiting, hoping. The people had changed. They no longer feared monsters outside the city walls. They feared what had come from inside. The black fog, the living shadows, the night the sky burned, and the human who stopped it all. The stories spread. He ate the beast. He laughed in the pit. He spoke to gods. And then he vanished. To some, he was a myth. To Ekari, he was memory, a scar, and a promise. One morning, something new appeared outside the palace gate. A mark burned into the ground. A perfect circle with one word in ancient human tongue. Open. Ekari's heart raced. She ordered the royal builders to break through the golden stone. They tried, and failed, until one of the builders stepped back and said, It's warm now. The stone glowed red, then cracked, then fell apart like ash. Inside, the chamber was empty. No body, no bones, no fire. Just a single piece of black cloth, a part of Mason's shirt. And beneath it, a small glowing device. Ekari picked it up. It hummed gently in her hand. A voice played from it. His voice. If you're hearing this, I made it through. Not alive. Not dead. Just changed. The thing I stopped wasn't the end. It was the beginning. And you gave me a reason to come back. Ekari sat down, her knees weak. She clutched the device to her chest. He wasn't gone. Not completely. Later that night, she walked to the edge of the sea. The same sea where the dark object had risen. The water was still, calm. She spoke softly to the waves. Mason, if you're out there, I'm not afraid. A wind passed over her shoulder, and she smiled. That same week, ships landed in orbit. Not enemy fleets. Human ships. Sleek, dark, silent. One by one, they entered the sky above the capital. People panicked. But then the message came, spoken in many languages. One simple sentence. We come in peace, because one of ours came home. Ekari stood before the council. Do not raise weapons, she ordered. This is not invasion. This is invitation. Trex stepped forward. Invitation to what, my queen? She stared at the stars. To finally understand the monsters we feared. The human delegation arrived the next day. Tall, calm, their eyes filled with stories. They wore no weapons, but each of them carried a symbol, a fong made of silver, and one of them carried a flag, black cloth, with a red outline, the shape of a man. Smiling, Ekari welcomed them in the Hall of Silence, the place where peace was once signed after a 1,000-year war. The lead human stepped forward and bowed. We bring knowledge, she said. We bring warning. We bring unity. Ekari bowed in return. What do you ask in exchange? The human smiled gently. Your memory of him. Ekari's eyes burned again. I never forgot, she said. That night, Ekari stood at the balcony once more. The sky was filled with new stars, ships, moving quietly, painting the galaxy with new hope. Beside her stood a statue now, not of a king, not of a god, but of a man, barefoot, bloody, smiling. Mason, the monster slayer, her savior. She placed a hand on the statue's chest and whispered, I feared you once. I tried to break you, but you changed me first. And now, I don't rule above you. I stand with you. Somewhere deep in the stars, a shadow moved. Not evil, not angry, just watching. And somewhere even deeper, a voice echoed through the void. She watched me devour her world's deadliest beast. And then she stood by my side when I became one.